radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right, welcome, Fade to Black, Wednesday, February 15th, 2023. Very excited about the show tonight, except for my cable. Check this out. It's shorting out, and I can't figure out why. Look, it broke. Look at this. Look. Can you believe that? So now I've got shorting out. I've got another pair of headphones here. I didn't have the time. Show started. This is what happens when Richard Bleepin' Dolan is our guest. He melts all this stuff. Richard Dolan is here with us tonight. We're going to be talking about what is going on in the skies over North America. Missiles, UFOs, UAPs, and the possible agenda behind it all. There's nobody better to do all of this. I want everybody to go to, either during the show, after the show tonight, but just get it done. Go to richarddolanmembers.com. The links are below. They're over on the website. I've got them up in social media. It's the place to hang out. Well, besides right here, right now. And I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to do the Richard Bleepin' Dolan CV that is like this long, and it takes me a half an hour. Takes away from the show. Because tonight, Richard Dolan and I, later on, we're going to discuss what's going on in North America. The first 90 minutes of the show, jazz and classic American films. That's what we're going to do tonight. You know what's funny? Hey, Richard, everybody's so excited, right? Richard's going to bring the big stuff tonight. We're going to throw down. And we talk about Miles Davis and baseball.
Right? We do enjoy the Miles Davis, and we do enjoy the baseball.
We do.
By the way, you've got a nice little intro theme going there. Is that new? Or do I just not pay attention? It could be either.
It's a combination of both. You don't pay attention.
I don't.
But it's new to you, Richard. That's all that matters.
And that's what matters. I thought it sounded pretty good. I thought you got a nice intro theme happening there.
I've got a really close mutual friend of ours that does stuff for me, and who doesn't like their name in public. So I will blurt it out, and then the next thing you know, all the cool stuff stops getting made for me. But all right. Yeah, there you go. No, I'm not that talented. I can't do stuff that good. And I know you're in the same boat. Who does your book covers? It's not you. No, I'm not saying.
No, it isn't. It isn't. Actually, Tracy runs that, and we don't have one person, but she will find people on Fiverr.
Oh yeah, Fiverr's great.
Fiverr? Yeah, Fiverr's really good. So you got a lot of people out there, very talented, that in a whole array of things. I've got someone on Fiverr doing audiobooks for me as well.
Wow, that's great. Fiverr is amazing.
Big fan.
Yeah,
that's really Tracy's thing. She runs that. I just sort of sign off, and I'm like, oh yes, I approve of this. But she does all the grunt work. 90% of it. I do a little bit.
Let me ask you. Richard and I, we're going to be talking about UFOs tonight. We're going to be talking about UAPs. We're going to be talking about what's going on in North America. That's why he's here. I need to know. And I was getting text, Richard, from some friends of ours. Did Richard already do the show? No. Okay. Right before the show. A lot of people are tuning in tonight, as they should.
Come on now. Come on.
But we're going to get to that. But I'm just curious. Instead of me asking the last song that you listened to today, unless you wrote it down, did you remember it?
I didn't write it down, but I actually do remember it. But we don't have to go there. We could try
It's
something
one
new.
cent. Do you even remember it? Are you getting out?
I
Trying to
do.
get out of it because you forgot?
I actually remember it.
Spit it out, my man.
It is Elvis Costello.
Whoa.
It is Elvis Costello. And a really great song that he didn't write, but he did the ultimate cover of it. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding?
Man.
Isn't that a great song?
Yeah, you know what? Also a great video. It's a great video. The early days of MTV. So
I think anyone under 50 must be listening to like these little moments of ours thinking, these dudes are old. It's Elvis Costello. But honestly, you listen to Elvis Costello in 1979, which is when I did, and he blew my doors away. He was just amazing.
Here's the thing about Elvis Costello. He got, in a strange way, he found himself a little pigeonholed, like he was just a punk guy, right? That he was,
yeah, in the beginning.
And what he really was, even then, right? But he was the musician's musician. Period.
Yeah, a great songwriter, absolutely, and a unique singer. Everything he did is just top notch.
That's right.
He really was and is great.
Now, if he would, if the Elvis Costello that we know now, right?
You know what his actual name is? His real name.
What is it?
Declan McManus.
That's right. That's right. But so if the guy that we know now was coming out, that I don't think he would have made it. No, peace.
Probably true of a lot of guys. Probably true about a lot of people.
Yeah, he got his foot in the door with.
That's a nice little song. It was written by Nick Lowe, who was with Rockpile and played with Dave Edmunds, and was Elvis Costello's producer for a number of his early albums. Nick Lowe was pretty cool. That's a nice kind of like latter-day hippie song. It's like, can't we all just get along? Got a little bit of a utopian vibe to it, but especially when I was a teenager, I was like, I love this song, and it's still a great song.
I remember a couple of years ago, you and I went on this Dave Edmunds, Nick Lowe,
Elvis. I do love those guys.
Tangent. Yeah. We went on that tangent for like 45 minutes. And I was watching the text. I was watching the chat. Jesus Christ, who is Dave Edmunds? And you and I, Nick, I'd never heard of this Nick Lowe guy.
I know. But they were great. They were great.
We were losing our minds over that, and nobody had a clue.
Edmunds especially. People really don't remember Dave Edmunds, but he was truly excellent.
Yeah, awesome. Excellent guitar player. Awesome. Okay, so see, we almost did it now. We're done, everybody.
Now, you wanted to move on to something else, though. You had another thing on your mind.
One question, because I've been on this Steven Spielberg kick over the last couple of weeks. So I went back. I just told you before the show, I watched his documentary called Spielberg. It's on HBO Documentaries. I watched that a couple of weeks ago. He's got his new film out called The Fabelmans, his life story. And so when you see the documentary and then you go and you watch The Fabelmans, which the way that his mom's portrayed and the way that it's all laid out in the documentary, The Fabelmans is his biopic, right? And it's really well made. But anyway, so I went back and I did them all. I did E.T. and I did, of course, I did Close Encounters. I did the horse.
So many.
I did War of the Worlds, which I hadn't seen that in a minute or two.
The Tom Cruise one, that was Spielberg?
Yes,
that was pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
That was a good movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went down memory lane. I didn't realize, but when you start to look at, dude has made a lot of films.
He did Jaws.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's right. No, I watched Jaws.
He did Saving Private Ryan.
I watched that. I watched
shattering movie.
Incredible. Okay, so my question is,
Schindler's List.
It's Schindler's List. The scenes with the girl with the red dress, and when she's walking down the streets of Warsaw, and the Nazis are hurting everybody up. She's by herself in the red dress, and then later on, Schindler, he sees her from the rooftop, right? And he takes note, and then later he sees her she's dead, in a pile of bodies on the wagon. Okay. What's your favorite Spielberg movie? Is there one that immediately comes to mind? Don't say Jaws, and don't say
probably Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, it's
I truly love that movie. It was an amazing movie. I don't know if it's the best one I ever saw by him, but it's the one that stands out to me. And I've seen it many times, and it just kind of blew me away.
Yeah, just as you said that, as I was asking the question, blop, there it is. Saving Private Ryan was my favorite. So okay, let's move on. I just got back from the.
You always make me laugh. You don't even try. You just make me laugh. I gotta hand it to you, Jimmy. You just do it.
I can't remember why we were laughing so hard last week in our text. Hold on for a second. Let me pull this up because you and I were killing each other. Oh, that's right.
Not that much. I don't think so.
No, it was the penguin pee. The Antarctic ice and Margaret.
Yeah, we did. We had a bit of a penguin pee conversation. Yeah, we did bring out the penguin urination.
Yes,
for a brief period.
Yeah, and we were laughing at that. But we do make each other laugh, man, for sure.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I enjoy that.
Especially when we come off of such a crazy, serious weekend too, as well, to have some brevity and stuff. I was at Conscious Life Expo Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And of course, we know what happened Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And to have a UFO conference, right? A consciousness UFO conference like that, and to have this going on at the same time, obviously everybody was talking about it. And it's pretty strange to go through the weekend with this. As we start to do the deep dive, looking back now on the 3 days, do you have an overall take as we get into this?
Yep, I do. Yeah.
What's your overall?
I did a thing on this on my channel on YouTube last night. Hey, go take a look at my channel, see what I have to say. But I'll just say here, I put out a couple of different scenarios because I don't really think anyone actually knows exactly yet. But we're developing some theories. I'm going to give you my theory. I don't know if I have time for it here before whatever you want to do a break, but I think it's a combination of a few things that actually happen. A, it's not UFOs. When I hear people talking about this as a UFO thing, I mean, maybe it is. I don't think it is. And I just find a lot of the UFO chat to be kind of cringy, in my opinion. I think what this is a geopolitical, in a lot of ways, distraction. And in a lot of ways, it's just something that blew up in a way that really, I think, would never have blown up in any other era. So by that, I mean, balloons have been used as spycraft actually for quite some time. You go back to the 1950s and 60s, the United States flew hundreds of balloons over the Soviet Union for espionage. Soviets did the same thing over West Germany during the Cold War. Everyone has known that China uses balloons. And you think, why would you use a balloon? Their satellites are so much better. And yes, satellites undoubtedly are better for a lot of things. But balloons are cheap. And balloons can, as I have learned in trying to study this and understand, there are lots and lots of commercial balloons that are set aloft all the time. So if you have a spy balloon and you just want to send it over, it may not be that difficult for it to just go unnoticed, even by something like NORAD. In fact, one of the things I said last night, I'm probably going to want to correct because a very smart person pointed something out. But essentially, I'll just say NORAD has a lot of that balloon traffic filtered out because there's just too much. There's too much traffic. And so it's absolutely possible for spy balloons to be used and to be effective. They can be. And undoubtedly, China does this. Now, here's the thing. We've known China has done this for many, many years. And no one was really having a conniption over it. I found a quote yesterday morning from the head of the U.S. I got this note right here in front of me. He's chief of Air Force Central Command. That's in the Middle East. This is Lieutenant General Alexis Grinkowicz. And I just saw an article about featuring him yesterday. And he's talking about how we in the Middle East, U.S. Command has been tracking Chinese balloons for the longest time. And he says, the level of concern I have about them is extremely low. It's not something I lose sleep over. He had a few other things to say, but that was basically it. It's like we spy on the Chinese, they spy on us, we spy on the Russians, they spy on us. There's cyber warfare that goes back and forth. There's all kinds of things. We got spy satellites over their territory. They have them over ours. It's like everyone knows this. Are you going to start a war over every single time this happens? That's the real question. So the real question to ask is not, is this something new? But why is this a thing now? Why is this a thing now?
Well, okay. And I don't know if you're done, but let me ask you.
I'm done for now.
Okay.
I'm done for now.
Is this, Richard, but why missiles all of a sudden?
What missiles? Am I missing something?
We shot down 3.
Oh, with missiles, yeah.
Yeah, missiles over North America. Why this sudden change?
Well, that's not a good look. I mean, think about this. You got to think what the Russians and Chinese are thinking looking over at America right now. Just stop and think. And really the war in Eastern Europe, and I don't want to get you in trouble. I probably got myself in trouble last night for everything that I said. But basically, it's part of my analysis. Because that war is not going well from a Western point of view. I'm just going to say this. It doesn't matter who you think is right or wrong. It's irrelevant. The facts on the ground do not look good for the NATO-aligned side of it.
Okay, and this is tied in.
I'm just going to leave. Yes, it is. Because
I'm saying how it's just tied in how.
This is an A++ level crap show that will only get worse in the coming weeks and months. And I guarantee it. And you've got the crazy neocons who surround the president right now. He's actually one of the crazy neocons, but we've got all these crazy people who have pushed $100+ billion into the war. All right, that's a drop in the bucket compared with what we did in Afghanistan and Iraq, but nonetheless, it's a lot of money. And the whole thing's going belly up. This is going sideways real fast, really fast. And I would not be surprised if you have some people thinking, let's move some eyeballs away from this, and we got to move toward China because that's really what we're going to be doing. That's the real issue. China is an actual problem for the U.S. geostrategically, and it all has to do with Taiwan. You got all the semiconductors being made there. A lot of semiconductors. We're in an era where AI is now got wings. It's taking off, and those semiconductors are more important than ever. And they're all made in that little island, like less than 100 miles off the coast of China. That China says, that's our country. And America's like, no, it isn't. And China's like, yes, it is. And, China's looking at the United States right now. Our manufacturing infrastructure for weapons is shot. That's a fact. We've been building for the wrong kind of a war. We've been fighting wars for the last 20 years against guys in the desert armed with AK-47s, not peer-level armies that have S-400 anti-aircraft rocket systems that'll shoot your aircraft out of the sky and much more. And we can't produce the amount. Our military manufacturing system is totally different than what Russia has and what China has for that matter. So they're able to produce. This is like a real shocking turnaround. I don't think most people are aware. So my point is very simple. This whole thing is going down real fast. And right now it's all about optics. It can only be about managing public perception. And so what I believe actually happened, this is my theory. The first balloon was spotted, I think, by civilians. Am I wrong here? I think civilians spotted it in Montana. And it became a thing. This was an unexpected, and for several days, the nation's like to Biden, why aren't you shooting this down? All the, the Republicans, especially who hate Biden, they want to take him down. It's like, this is invading our sovereignty. So says the nation that invades everyone's sovereignty, but we'll just leave that aside for the moment. This is our violation of our sovereignty. And what are you going to do about it? So he had to shoot it down. I would bet 10-1 odds that the military itself is thinking, we don't really want to do this, but this is all White House. Like they had to do it for political optics because you can't appear weak because you're barely hanging on by your fingernails to your reputation in Eastern Europe right now. That's about to go away. So we got to look strong and shoot the balloon out of the sky. And then once you get the first one, now everyone is aware of the balloons. So now There's balloon number 2 the next day, balloon number 3 the day after that, and balloon number 4 the day after that. They all have to go.
Have they run out of targets? I was pretty surprised we didn't have anything on Monday, Tuesday, or tonight.
Yeah, well, I mean,
yeah, if you know what I'm saying, I expected this trend to continue. I mean, why stop?
You got to look how farcical and foolish this looks. A lot of people in the UFO community, like, they're getting excited. It's like, hey, UFOs are being mentioned in the news. Maybe these are UFOs. They're not UFOs. If they were actual UFOs, you wouldn't shoot 4 down 4 days in a row.
Why do
not
you
happening?
Okay.
Not real UFOs. I mean, I'm not saying a real UFO has never been shot down, but 4 for 4, not happening. That doesn't happen. These are not UFOs.
Yeah, suddenly they're running in slow motion like they're in a giant tank of Canadian molasses, right? It just doesn't make any sense. But here's the thing. At least from my optics, like three or four mistakes have been made. So let's go to the first one, which is the Department of Defense and ODNI have been putting UAPs out front with reports and public hearings and conversation and FOIAs and then leaked video, so that's been out there. And then when stuff starts getting shot out of the sky, they've created their own problem, right? Where they've done this, where, all of this has been talked about, and now suddenly we're shooting stuff out of the sky, and now they have to backpedal when the public is going, what's going on? Well, you've prepped us for this for so long that of course we're going to ask if these are ET or alien, because this is all you've been talking about since 2017, right?
Well,
so did they create this problem for themselves?
It was kind of created for them. I still do not believe that the Navy voluntarily said, hey, we're going to start talking to the public about UFOs. I don't believe that. What I think is that there are always factions within the national security state. And we had the Elizondo and Mellon and the TTSA faction. Yeah, they have intelligence connections, but they also had enemies. They had friends, they had enemies. They were able to get the UFO UAP matter out to the public. They had help from people like Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, and they made a breakthrough. And so that forced the Pentagon and the Navy into eventually having to do something about it. If you remember, for the whole first year and a half, it was one attack on those guys after another. I remember one time you cornered me. I think it was at Contact in the Desert a few years ago when the Pentagon was calling Elizondo a liar, saying he'd never run ATIP. Well, that was a lie. But the fact was that there was an information war going on behind the scenes. And so the Pentagon got dragged into this. And I think that they've done a masterful job of handling the PR.
Right.
They've taken control of the narrative. So, but I think if they really had things the way they wanted, we'd be in, where we were in 2016 and 2015 and before that. I think that was the ideal for them. But now that it's been brought out, it's been made a little bit of a public thing. Yeah, they are working with that, and they are using that to their advantage. So now, yes, UFOs, UAP, they're not the kiss of death in the media that they once were. You can talk about them and people aren't going to laugh at you. So it is out there now. And this is part of the result. It's like, yes, the public is aware. This is what happened in the old days of Project Blue Book back in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, 50s and 60s, where the Air Force was in this really tough spot. On the one hand, they would say to the public, these UFOs are hoaxes, hallucinations, misidentifications, and so forth. But the problem that they always had was, yeah, but why do you have Project Blue Book to investigate these things if you think there's nothing to it? Why? And the fact was the Air Force never had a good answer for that. They kept trying to unload Blue Book for years. They finally succeeded at the end of the 60s, but it took them a while. And we're finding the military in a similar position again now. So they never once have pressed the red alien alarm button and said, run for the hills, the aliens are here. They don't do that. Everything they say plays it down. Everything. And what's interesting, last thing I'll say.
Okay.
UFOs are now they're using balloons and they're describing them as UFOs. Ask yourself, what's that all about? Why are they using the phrase UFO to describe something that are clearly balloons and clearly either Chinese surveillance or maybe US drones? Who the hell knows? But they're not UFOs, and they know that, but they're using the phrase UFO. Why?
That's right. That's right. And so a couple of weeks ago, I called you up out of the blue to compliment you and talk to you about UFOs and National Security State Volume 1, and that I was reading it for like the fourth time.
Yeah, that was great.
And we talked a little bit then about how you wrote that in 2000.
I published the first edition in 2000. I actually wrote it in the late 90s.
Okay,
starting from no knowledge. That was my education, that book.
But the way and the subject and the way that it's approached in that book, which is now 23 years ago, we're reliving it right now. It's pretty shocking to see how accurate your analysis was in foretelling the future on this. I find that extremely compelling, Richard.
I'll have to reread it myself now, but yeah, thank you.
right. Okay, so that was mistake number one, in my opinion, and they're dealing with that.
Wait, mistake number one. I just want to make sure I'm following you. Is shooting them down with a missile?
That we've had UFOs and UAPs in the conversation in the public eye for the last 5 years. Suddenly this starts happening, missiles. Well, it's on everybody's mind. And so the questions are going to come back to the Department of Defense about what is actually going on. I think that's mistake number one. Mistake number two, they have not released a single image or video. I don't understand that. And if they are telling us that they are acquiring a target, scrambling jets, and not getting imaging of these before they shoot them down, that's bullshit. That's not true. And so right now, with missiles flying over North America, that I think that the American public deserves to see what we are shooting down. And
that's interesting.
Why? I think this is a huge mistake.
Yeah, they've stated, the official statement, unless I'm wrong, is that the numbers 2, 3, and 4 they have not recovered.
No,
didn't they say that?
About when they were, yes. Hold on, that's point number 3. So that's point number 3. But point number 2, that they've shot video and captured still images of these objects and have not released anything. If it's just commercial balloons gone astray, release the pictures.
That's an interesting point. I would say this, from their point of view. I mean, think about it. You're an authoritarian government that you're in the middle of a revolution against your people, part of a worldwide phenomenon. You don't want to get into the habit of over sharing with your public, right? So do you want the people to be used to the idea that you're just going to share information with them? Probably not. So that's probably their motivation. Are they actually hiding something? I don't think they're hiding the fact that these are alien craft. I just don't believe it. Now, let me just say, someone's going to have to do some FOIA to see what information can be obtained. So it's really not appropriate for me to say that I know for a fact that they're not genuine UFOs. But I will say I don't believe that they're genuine UFOs.
So
I just don't think so.
When you combine the comments, that have come out publicly about this, and everything's been, very limited, and we all know that the information has been sparse, but no images. And if you are going to say, and these quotes are out there, now we have determined that they were harmless and that these were either commercial or private balloons. Release the photographs. Release the video.
There's a couple of other possibilities here, Jimmy.
Well, I didn't get to 3 and 4. So
keep coming. Please.
So I'm going to skip over 3 because you kind of mentioned it. Let's go to 4. There was a quote 2 days ago on Monday at one of the press conferences with a general. I'm going to paraphrase. I don't have it out in front of me, but he literally said to the press corps, I can't say it wasn't aliens. And I'm like, wait. You just said harmless, not him. What's her name from the White House? The press
Karine Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, Jean-Pierre. So, you've got that, and then you're going to step up and say, well, I can't say that it's not aliens, but it's this mixed message. And then if we're going to get to the fifth point, which is to suggest in any way, I don't care if a Cessna goes down, some small plane in the Rocky Mountains in some remote region or the Yukon or whatever, FAA, Canadian authorities, all over that, investigating it, retrieving the debris, laying it out in an airplane hangar and figuring out what's going on. Minutes after they will arrive and get there and somehow do everything that they can. But we shoot down 3, well, we can call it 4, but I'm talking about the 3 this weekend. And to respond back that we shot stuff down with missiles and we may never recover the debris, that's bullshit. It's bullshit. They've got it now. There is no way that they don't.
If they actually shot down 3. I mean, I don't really know if they did. No one really knows. I don't know how truthful these people are. These are the people who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. There, I've said that.
Let's not go there. Here we go. I don't watch that.
But these are the, I'm just saying, you cannot expect honesty in any way to come out of the United States government. I'm sorry. You can't. These are not honest players. And so this leads into a couple of my other scenarios. Scenario number 1 is what I said earlier, which is a civilian saw it, it became a big thing, and the Biden White House felt like, oh, crap, we got to do something about this, which I do think is part of it. But I also think that this is part of a pivot. Well, I guess I did say a pivot really away, a slow pivot, but a pivot away from the debacle that's happening in Eastern Europe onward to the next debacle, which will be over probably China and Taiwan. I think they're going to move to that. You had Mark Milley, who's, he's Joint Chiefs. What is he? He's saying, China 2025 could be a war. It's insane, but this is how these people think. So they're clearly looking for the next engagement. And China is important. Taiwan is important. It actually really, really is. It's very important to China, and it's very important to the United States. That's a problem that's not going to go away. And so you could see maybe the U.S. is trying to just build up the tension to justify something against China. I mean, I assume that China had surveillance balloons, at least the first one. I am quite likely to believe that was a Chinese spy balloon. They say it was a commercial meteorological balloon. It's probably a spy balloon. But the next 3, it is very odd. And I could easily see this being just pure optics as a way to ramp up tensions with those individuals on the other side of the world, China. I think that's what very likely is happening.
If China responded or did a press release 2 days ago, I'm sure you saw it, that they now have their own UFO / spy balloon cruising past Beijing, and they have determined that they were going to shoot it down.
Right. And,
a little tit for tat thing. They responded to us that it was a commercial weather balloon and this is wrong and we shouldn't have shot it down. Are we going to say anything if this turns out to be one of our surveillance balloons?
I'm sure we won't. And the American people will never hear about it.
Yeah. I mean, we won't give a crap.
China said that, who knows what's true and what's not true, but China said a few days ago that in the past 12 months that they had tracked 10 U.S. spy balloons over their country. Did they really? I don't know. Could they have? Sure, of course they could have. I don't know if that's what the U.S. really does, but I wouldn't see it as impossible.
Yeah, I don't.
Like I said, balloons can be useful. They're more useful than we may have realized.
Up in Seattle at the Boeing factory, they have the Boeing Museum. It's frigging incredible. But one of the things that they have at that Air Museum is they have an SR-71. We've all seen them. I've got a couple down the street. I drive past them all the time now. But back then it was pretty special to me, right? It's kind of a rare thing. So I go to the museum and there it is. But that wasn't what caught my eye, Richard. Next to it was the drone, the stealth drone that was built to launch off of the SR-71 in the 60s. At the time, I had never heard of it. So I go and I look. It looks like a miniature SR-71. I'll come up with the name of it here in a second. As you respond to this, I'll look it up. But it wasn't that. It was the little placard underneath it, right, as I'm reading it. And it said something like this: the stealth spy drone the United States built to fly over mainland China, right? I was like, there it is, right? And it's not like this is all something new. You know, we figured that we would take the SR-71, get close, make a U-turn, but let this little guy keep going, right, across China. Yeah. And that was in the 60s, but it literally didn't say Russia. Right, it didn't say it did. There was a China. It didn't say North Korea, right? It didn't say Vietnam, right? It said mainland China.
Interesting. Yeah, no surprise. Because this is the game that we grew up. Remember Mad Magazine, Spy versus Spy, all about the Cold War, and in everyone who's listening, for as long as everyone listening has been alive, there's been nations spying on each other. And long after we are gone, there will be nations spying on each other. That is the rule. It's never going to stop. This is our world. So China will spy on the U.S. will spy on China. And just like the General Alexis Grinkowicz, who said, I'm not losing any sleep over it. I'm not saying it's not a threat. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be worried about espionage of another country. Of course, it's an issue, but the fact is it's very widespread and it's been going on for a long time. And this was not something that people were making literally a federal case out of every single time. You can't every time you catch someone doing some nasty business in your country, you're going to go to war every time. It's not how this works. It's not a good idea. It's not a good survival strategy.
Check this out, Richard.
That's the drone.
That's the D-21
wow
spy drone.
Yeah,
isn't that crazy? And we always think of drones. It looks just as elegant, doesn't it, as the SR-71?
Oh, it looks fast.
Oh man! And so we think about this all the time. Drones being something from the 2000s or this is some modern technology, but there it is. And I stood right next to it. It's a pretty crazy thing to see.
How large is that when you're standing next to it?
I'm going to say it was, I actually have that data here. Would you like that data, Richard?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Yeah. Here we go.
Is it as big as a truck? Is it as big as what is it as big as?
Okay. It was originally... It was retired in 1971. They built 38 of them, built to be launched off of the Lockheed A-112 and SR-71. The drone had a maximum speed of Mach 3.3. Right? Okay. Operational altitude of 90,000 feet. 1962. Right, 1962. Yeah. That's crazy. Lockheed, blah 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 blah. And now let me get the dimensions of this dude. Design and development. If I don't pull this up in like the next few seconds, we will move on. All right, I'll see if I can pull this up. I've got all the speeds here.
There's always the break. I didn't want to put you onto a whole wild goose chase there.
Yeah, but it's just so interesting how suddenly all of this has become an issue when you're right. Mad Magazine and Spy versus Spy has been covering this in elementary schools across America for the last 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, even more. I just think that what we're looking at, this is something that doesn't make the United States look good. I really think this is not a good look for the United States.
What isn't a good look?
You got the military
them down?
scrambling around to shoot a bunch of balloons out of the sky.
Right.
You think foreign diplomats in other countries aren't like chuckling a little bit as the U.S. basically splashes around like a man drowning in the ocean? Like, oh my God, another balloon! Got to shoot this down.
Right.
It's not a good look. I'm just going to say that. I just don't think it's. We're supposed to be the world's greatest superpower. We cannot monitor our own airspace. Nope, apparently not. Not from balloons.
Does Russia and China, because that stuff is flying over there all of the time, being launched on both sides of their countries to monitor their airspace, are they just letting those balloons go and they're not doing anything about it?
Good question. I don't know. I do not know. I mean, this is not something that really, I don't think any of us were really thinking about before a week ago. I wasn't thinking about balloon espionage, I have to admit. So I don't know. I've still not figured out how serious a problem is this. I know that in the 50s and 60s, because I looked into this, that the United States did send hundreds of balloons aloft over the Soviet Union for purposes of espionage. And that the Russians, the Soviets did the same thing over West Germany, over NATO during the same period of time. It was common. I didn't have the idea that it was still common today, but apparently I was wrong. I mean, we're assuming China was engaged in espionage. They probably were. We actually don't know for a fact. They keep denying it. Of course they're going to deny it. Let's assume that it was a spy balloon, but we really don't know. So I'm going to assume it was. We don't really have the information.
And if, okay.
I mean, the United States has made many, many false claims just in the last couple of years over all kinds of things.
How did you take the words out of my mouth? How did you do that? That was bad. Is that so? If you're not going to, it's like, did the tree fall in the woods, right? If you're not going to produce any photographs or videos, you're not going to produce any debris, and you're saying that that's never happened, did anything get shot down in the first place?
Well, the first balloon.
We've seen the images of that. About this weekend, the three. No, we've recovered that debris. Okay, we get that. Everybody saw that.
That's your octagonal shape. I heard. Did I hear Tic Tac? Did someone say it was a Tic Tac shape? Or was that
one was the size of a small car. Right. I haven't heard them say whether it was a Yugo or a Volkswagen Bug. What is small in that description?
But a balloon, there are weather balloons that are the size of a small car.
The second one was a cylinder, right? Nobody's giving us colors, by the way. So the first one that was a small car, was it white? Could it be Tic Tac?
Or performance capabilities. Like I'm not hearing if they're maneuvering or doing anything like that, I haven't heard a thing about that.
Second one was the cylinder. The third one was the octagon. Now, is octagon, was it something flat with the stop sign shape? Or was it a geodesic dome octagon kind of shape?
Is that possible? I don't know.
Well,
that's a good question, though. That's a really good question. What if it's it's got two halves to it, and the first top has got four sides, and the bottom part has got four sides?
Because you see that shielding a radar antenna, right? You see the domes around the radar antenna, right. And then the radar antenna is protected on the inside of it, and it's doing its thing.
Okay.
Could it have been something like that, where there was some type of, electronic equipment inside of some type of, we've heard octagon. I don't even know what that means, man.
It's possible. I mean, we're given nothing to work with here, and we're just being told that our military is on top of this. We're sending up those F-22s with our missiles, and we're going to shoot those balloons down. Someone said to me that I was being kind of unfair because last night I kind of made fun, like we're doing here. You're setting up an F-22 with a Sidewinder or some kind of missile to take down a balloon. It's like using a hammer to kill an ant. Like, really, that's how you're going to do this? But someone said, look, they're just following procedures. I think they were talking about the Canadian one where I think it was an F-22 that shot down the object over Canada. And I was making fun of it. but someone said, look, it's just standard operating procedure. You have a violation of airspace or something that has to be dealt with. You get the aircraft that's in the nearest vicinity that can do the job. And I guess it was an F-22.
Chris
Expensive,
Holmes,
though.
he said this is the Octagon one was rotating. It was reported by the pilot. And I did get some email earlier today that Ross Colfart read a transcript back from some radio chatter from the pilot with the Octagon. I haven't read it,
Okay.
but I would like to see that. And I can reach out to Ross, and so can you, and we'll see if we can get some more on that.
Yeah, these may not have. I mean, maybe they don't have anything to do with China. I mean, there are lots of private balloons that are set aloft, private drones that are set aloft. There's really no reason to think that all of these are from China. We are told that the first one was from China.
And China,
willing to believe that.
Man, China didn't say anything about these other three. And I found that pretty, you kind of got to take a mental note of that. They didn't.
So we're just working off a lot of blind. I have to think that, again, like rule number one, do not trust what comes out of the mouths of the Washington establishment. I know it sounds cynical, but I think if we follow that rule, we're unlikely to go wrong. They're not honest. They're pathological in their dishonesty. So there may be some truth in there, but there's a lot of dishonesty in there. I have no doubt.
I don't want to. I want to have the discussion because you're one of the experts on this about false flags, and you and I over the years have talked. This is your wheelhouse, but you and I have talked a lot about this, both publicly and privately. And I have always, I'll just remind you of my point of view, that if there was going to be a UFO false flag, it wouldn't be over a populated area. It would be out in the middle of the ocean. We shot down a UFO where nobody can see it, right? So that's why you would have the false flag out there. Nobody can see it. And now
what would be the purpose of such a false flag?
Because then you can say whatever you want. You could say whatever you want. You can make up any story if there's no. You can't have a UFO false flag over New York City.
Can you have a UFO false flag that no one sees a UFO? Is that really going to work?
We're doing it now, aren't we?
Not really.
We did it this
who believes that these are actual UFOs?
Well, this is my point, though. I'm not suggesting the false flag scenario over this weekend, but if you're going to do it without any evidence being produced, do it without any debris being produced, any images, any radar data, nothing but your word that these incidents occurred. And so if you're going to do that, right, and possibly, like you said, wind up China, wind up an adversarial position on this, it's the perfect way to do it.
I don't think so. Here's why. You could do a false flag like that and maybe convince part of your own population. They'll be willing to believe it. But you got a whole world out there, and you have foreign diplomats. They're not stupid, most of them. Like, they're pretty smart people. The Chinese foreign ministry, the Russian foreign ministry, the foreign ministries of Africa or of the other nations of Asia, India. Do you really think they're going to be like, oh, wow, America shot down a flying saucer? I don't think so. On America's word, Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, do you really think he's going to believe if Joe Biden makes an announcement that we shot down a UFO over the Pacific Ocean? Really? I think there's not a lot of credibility that would be coming out of Washington on that matter. And I think that the age has passed in which the rest of the world is just going to take America's word for something just because America says so. They're going to want to see something. I don't think that kind of a false flag is necessarily going to work. I mean, yes, America does dominate the global media for the most part, but there are people, like well-educated, smart people who are in the business. They're in the business of diplomacy. They deal with the United States in the intelligence community. They're going to know. They're going to know the truth. It's not going to be that easy to fool them on that. False flags do happen, but that kind of a false flag, an alien false flag, I have just never found a way that someone can create a plausible alien false flag scenario to me to make it work.
Well,
what you're describing is maybe better.
Yes.
What you're describing is actually a better scenario than, something like Independence Day.
You're right.
Some holographic projection. I would agree with that, but I don't think it's good enough to work. I can't see it happening. It's a big ask of the international diplomatic corps and all the other people out in the world who are becoming very reserved about the United States. The U.S. is losing a lot of last couple of years. They're losing India, losing Saudi Arabia, they're losing Turkey. This is a serious international realignment that's happening as we speak.
We've lost him before. It's like The Godfather.
We have not lost Saudi Arabia before, and we have not lost Turkey before. Here's very significant.
Here's my take with that, though. Mm-hmm. If the president of the United States, whoever it is, literally crossed, if there's a red line, right, crossed the line and says, we shot down a flying saucer, not of this world.
Right.
I'm not so sure that people wouldn't pay attention.
We would all pay attention.
If you're going to be looking, if you're going to cross, what are you suggesting that most of the state actors and population of the world would go? I don't believe it. I don't know.
It all depends on how the information is presented.
I'm saying without any information, no video, no nothing. Shut down.
They're going to wait
over the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, I think we're past. This is not like Ronald Reagan's America. This is not Bill Clinton's America. This is a different world, and there's been, as I say, a major realignment. And I don't think the United States wouldn't just say we shot down a flying saucer. Trust us. That's not going to work. They're going to have to produce something.
Okay, so back to my point, which is point number one with that, because I agree with you. Why no photographic evidence and why no debris on these last three things? You're making claims, you're saying things, we're shooting missiles over our country, over Canada.
Well, I don't know that I have an answer. I don't know that I can answer that. I just don't feel like there's enough information for me. I mean, I'd just be guessing like anyone else.
So do we believe you just said don't trust anything? I'm with you on that.
Yeah, so really we shouldn't. Yeah.
Is all of this just bullshit?
Kind of, yes, it is. Yeah, basically. And this statement by the general, well, we can't rule out aliens. I remember that. So someone asked him.
Oh, you did hear it.
Yeah. So he was asked, could this be genuine UFOs or aliens? And I think what he said, I read the quote, I didn't hear it. I think he said, I'm not ruling anything out. I'm giving that to intelligence. So let them figure it out.
Oh, that was the follow-up. Yeah, that was what he said after. You're right. No, he said, I cannot not say it wasn't aliens.
I don't think that
the intelligence community.
I don't think he was saying like wink, wink, it's aliens. I don't read it that way. I think he was just, his rule is I'm not here to speculate. We're ruling nothing out. It's like he's got his script. You will rule nothing out. You're not going to answer any. Like I'm sure this is very micromanaged, and so he's just probably performing the script. That doesn't mean that he's saying, "Oh yeah, wink, wink, people." I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. I don't think he's doing that. I think now, but there is this other kind of really nasty element to this whole thing about bringing in UFOs when we're talking about balloons and things like that. The question is why? This is quite significant in my opinion, because what we are seeing is a further twisting by the establishment of what UFOs actually are. So they've done this for the whole history of UFOs. Back 70 years ago, they were calling UFOs as mistaken balloons. There's always been this conflation. Now it was just a balloon. So now they're doing it again. They're talking about things that are obvious balloons and conventional objects, and they're calling them UFOs. And the question is why? Is it laziness on the part of the media that says, well, people are into UFOs, let's just throw the word out there? Maybe that's part of it. Or is there an element to the cover up? Let's just go there, where they're saying, all right, we're just going to like manage, we're going to rebrand this yet again. And we're going to just siphon all of the value and meaning out of the actual phrase UFO, because there are real UFOs. These are not it. We're going to siphon all meaning out of it. We're going to call these UFOs, and we're just going to continue watering it down until the definition is meaningless. And I do think there's some of that going on.
Is this some Aesop fable, right? The boy who cried wolf, where the next time something like this happens and it's the real thing, the government says something and we blow it off. It's just weather.
The real thing happens all the time. There's constant military engagements with these things, and they don't get any attention in press.
Right.
I go through Peter Davenport's site, the National UFO Reporting Center. I talk it up all the time. I believe in that site. It's a great site, and I acknowledge most of those are raw reports. They don't get follow-up investigations, but they're damned interesting to read. And you go through that, and you will find, in any given year, many witness accounts of jet interceptors chasing UFOs. It happens. And they don't get media attention. There are genuine cases of this kind of thing happening, of objects performing incredible maneuverability back in the 1940s and 50s and today. And, engagements with the United States military and other militaries. That happens. Those never get attention. And I don't see any reason why they're going to get attention, because those are the real deal. So anytime there's a balloon and they want to call it a UFO, that's a win for them. And that's a loss for us if we let that continue, because they're watering down and twisting the definition of genuine UFOs just into nothingness.
No, but that's right. And for everybody, I'm going to give you a shameless plug here, Richard. I'll do it for you. If you haven't, go and get Volume 1 and Volume 2 of UFOs in the National Security State. And if you go through Volume 1, Richard, you can correct me, but starts around the 1947-ish. There might be, he might step back into 46 on a couple of things, which was interesting. But anyway, goes
World War II, but basically.
Yeah, and dances into the 1956, 1957 era. I don't think he gets into 1960. But okay. But go and I like to think that I know a lot. The amount of U.S. military and U.S. government observations and encounters with UFOs through that period that nobody has ever heard of. Nobody. And Richard, you do it like this. It's page after page, and so go and see that for yourself. It's pretty incredible. So no, and when you read your descriptions of these events, of what was going on, these were not weather balloons. Obviously, these were under intelligent control.
Thank you for that plug. I appreciate that. There's a lot of sightings. I remember when I put that first book together, it was in the mid and late 90s. And as I said earlier, that really was my education in the UFO field. I started, when I began that project, I did not know very much about UFOs. And I read book after book after book after book after book. And I took good notes. That's what allowed me to do my book. And I was very fortunate in how I did that project, because I took all of books from Donald Kehoe and the Lorenzens and all the OGs of ufology, and I created chronological databases from every single book, and I put those chronological databases together into one big fat database. And on the basis of that, I crafted my narrative, and I had a lot of UFO cases to work with. So I think in that book, it actually started the narrative in 1941. And went to 1973, and I tracked just under 300 military encounters with UFOs and in engagements that involved 50 U.S. military bases that appeared in that book. And then the second volume, I think I had a little bit more. But there's a lot there. And frankly, even from what I tallied, there's so much more. There's so much more. I just was able to grab the stuff that was available from Freedom of Information and, things that you'd find in Donald Kehoe's books and the like. And that was a lot.
Oh, man. He would be losing his mind today. Kehoe. He would be.
He'd be very disappointed. He'd be heartbroken.
He would be losing his mind.
Kehoe believed in Donald Kehoe was one of my first heroes in the UFO field, and he is a guy who believed in the process. He believed in working with Congress, and he believed in the American system, and that the American people had a right to know about this, and that we had a right not to be lied to by our government, and all of these amazing things. But he was living in the 1950s and 60s when he was active, when people could believe that. Who believes that now? I mean, we believe in those ideals, but who actually thinks that we have a functioning system? I don't.
I have a hardcover first edition of his first book, right? 1950, right? Got it here. And it is still, Richard, I think holds up, man.
Yeah, I agree. The
That
flying
thing
saucers are real.
Yes, man, that
There's the
thing
time.
holds up. It holds up. Let's take our break right here. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Richard Dolan is our guest. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back. Check out Billy Carson's Forbidden Knowledge. ForbiddenKnowledge.com or ForbiddenKnowledge.tv, where you can get access to over 6,000 videos, movies, TV series, exclusive documentaries like the Black Knight Satellite. You can do it all for just $7.77 per month or $77 per year after the 3-day trial, which is also totally free to check out. It's all simple to do. Billy Carson is the best. It's simple. ForbiddenKnowledge.com or ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's the number 4BK. I will be hosting and emceeing the Conscious Life Expo this February 10th through the 13th at the LAX Hilton right here in Los Angeles, California. 200 speakers, including Linda Moulton Howe, Bashar, Deborah King, George Norrie, Daniel Sheehan, Scott Walter Johnstone, and David Wolf. Over 200 vendors, special events. This is the biggest event of its kind on planet Earth. You've got to come and hang out with all of us. Tickets and info at ConsciousLifeExpo.com. The links are below. On Saturday, April 1st, that's right, April Fool's Day 2023, I will be hosting the Parapod Festival at the Hyatt Regency right here in Valencia, California. It's a live one-day podcast awards. It's a film festival. It's a full-on media event. We're going to have sky watching. There's going to be a Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Linda Moulton Howe. Right now, you can submit your podcast, your film, your TV series, any of your paranormal media for consideration. You can do all of that on the links below. For info and tickets, go to parapodfilmfest.com. That's parapodfilmfest.com. April 7th through the 14th, 2023, I'll be hosting and presenting on the Hidden Secrets Seminar at Sea Cruise. From Los Angeles to the Mexican Riviera on the Navigator of the Seas. That's right, up top, a giant water slide. You've got to check out the Navigator of the Seas. It's amazing. We've got Scott Walter, Adam Apollo, Nick Pope, Brad Olson, Vivian Chauvet, Jason Shirka, Robert Grant, Ruben Langdon, and another 12 amazing speakers and presenters. It's all simple to do. Just visit divinetravels.com/Hidden Secrets 2023. You know you want to go on a cruise with me. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, River Moon Coffee. Okay. Enough of that. The best. Richard Dolan is our guest tonight. Now, Richard, here's where I want to go. I'm going to present a hypothetical scenario for a second.
going wherever you want to lead, Jimmy.
Yeah, well, we're going down that dark road. Here's the thing. We have Perseverance on Mars, right? Going across the Martian surface at about a mile an hour, right? Whatever it's doing, right? Forever. As far as I know, no defensive or offensive capabilities on that thing. I don't think there's any guns. We've also got an aircraft on Mars, right? Ingenuity, right? Flying around. As far as I know, no heat-seeking missiles on that little guy. The stuff that we've had on the moon and so forth, these land and things, very slow and but we're collecting data. Now, hypothetically speaking, is it too much of a stretch to suggest that some stuff here coming from elsewhere, right? An intelligent species out there, an ETC, sending stuff out to observe another planet, could be slow moving, could not, possess offensive and defensive capabilities and wouldn't care about. And now I'm not saying everything. I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking, that it is possible, isn't it, that some things could be here just to cruise around and not have a whole lot of crazy technology on it, and it's just here to collect data, and it could get shot down?
Sure. Yeah, it's possible. But you'd think, though, that if there's an alien species that would do that, they would probably know that they're sending their probe to Earth. It's not just going to arrive at Earth randomly. So one would assume it's intentional. And one would assume that they are aware, oh, this is a planet that has a lot of life. And are they just going to go at some point? If they have a satellite that's high enough, they're going to see a whole bunch of other satellites in orbit. So they're going to know, presumably right away. And then, all of our RF signals and all of the stuff coming off of the planet, they're probably going to have a realization that there's a technologically advanced species on that planet.
But what if it's a von Neumann situation where it's self-replicating and just out exploring every single planet in the Milky Way, trillions.
Good point.
And these things are just being manufactured to go and collect data and
sure, you know what? That could be. Why not? Why not? That doesn't follow most of the observational data that I would have on UFOs, but yeah, I would totally say it's possible. Yeah, could be.
And the other part with this, I think about this all the time, and I've got a twisted mind. I just don't look at things probably as rational as I should. But here's the other thing. If we do have, we do, this is a fact, where we've got 40, 50 billion with a B, rocky Earth-like planets in the Goldilocks zone, in our Milky Way, just right there, it's a numbers game. So how much of that supports life? How much of it is intelligent life? How much of it, another small percentage, is interstellar, right? Okay, so if we go with that, but it's 40 billion, and you go with like a 0.1%, you're still dealing with hundreds of millions of advanced civilization. It's a big number. And so therefore, if they're getting here, and I believe that they are, we would be seeing all kinds of different civilizations. It's not just one.
We might be, right?
Right. It could be thousands.
You get one of the weird things about the UFO phenomenon is that it doesn't behave the way, most of us would want it to behave. We want one alien species with one kind of craft.
Right.
So that we can figure it out. And instead, what you have are a wide range of craft designs and shapes and types. And you have a wide range of alleged, let's just say, alien beings.
Yes.
That look they're very different. It's different species. Even among what we would call grays, there's a very wide range in their size and in the type and in the way the eyes look, and in a lot of details are described very differently. And so you're really left wondering, are people not reporting this accurately? Maybe there's some kind of mind manipulation going on. Okay. But is it that much of a variation that you've got all of this, or are we dealing with different species?
Yeah, different. Well, look at the two of us, Richard. Take a really close look. To somebody else, we could be from two different planets, right? If you really think about it, there's nothing similar. We've got the in-shape, good-looking guy. We've got the fat, bloated, pasty dude over. But I don't dye my hair. But here, you know what I mean? We could be, right?
I think human beings actually have a remarkable homogeneity within our genetic structure. Like we actually have less variety as a species than many other species on this planet. Part of the reason is that all the other hominins that evolved with us are gone. Neanderthals are gone. The Denisovans are gone. The Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, they're gone. They were all pretty recent.
Yeah,
they were all standing up bipedal hominins like us. They looked more different. I'm just saying that when you have a description of an alien being that's 3 feet high and a description of an alien being that's 5 feet high, that's a pretty big range right there. And then when you have a description of an alien being that's got big black wraparound eyes and a big wide head, but then a description of a gray being that doesn't have big black wraparound eyes and has a thin but large head, and that happens. I was just reading one of Len Stringfield's reports that described that. So now you're talking, that's a variation enough that I'm thinking that's not the same species. There's no way that I'm going to see a big fat head and a tall, skinny head as belonging to the same species. That's called morphology, and this is what paleoanthropologists look at all the time. They're doing all these minute, measurements of all these ancient skulls they're finding, and they're classifying them as different species, I think rightly so. I think we should do the same thing with these aliens. So there's a lot of different species, which would speak to, if these reports are accurate, that would speak to what you're saying, that there's a wide variety that's out there. Or you could say there are a wide range of genetic manipulations. That's the other thing I have to always wonder. How many of these species are naturally occurring, purely naturally occurring, and how many of them are artificially enhanced through, genetic manipulation and so forth? I mean,
and
no
we're
way of
doing
knowing.
that. Yeah, and we're doing that now.
Yeah, for sure.
I have no idea where CRISPR is going to lead the human race in the next 50 years. I have no idea.
I think it's going to lead us into a variety of human types. I think that's going to happen. I don't know about 50 years, but within a couple of centuries, our pace of, evolution is rapidly increasing. And when you're talking about self-directed, essentially is what this is. Oh my God, this can go into a lot of really crazy places. But the thing is, will those variations work? You start changing, you start screwing around the species. A species has to survive within its ecosystem and environment. And you start messing with it too much, you might be undercutting its survivability.
Well, yeah. Well, like simple things like reproduction, right? Suddenly, not right. Right. And you mess with too many chromosomes and too much DNA, the next thing you know, we can't, as far as I know, I don't think we can mate with lions and tigers, right? Even though our DNA is close, right? But we can't. It's a chromosome and DNA issue. Let me ask you this, staying on this subject. If Enrico Fermi was alive today, do you think he would say the same things? Do you think the Fermi paradox would stand today?
Well, I think he probably would, because there are a lot of scientists in cosmology and in physics who, most of them don't know a lot about UFOs, but they repeat the Fermi paradox. Like, where is everybody? So what they're saying is there should be life out there. Why isn't it here? Our answer is, Well, maybe you want to look at some UFO evidence before you make that determination. But I think it all depends on what Fermi's attitude about UFOs would be. But assuming that he's a typical establishment scientist who doesn't study the matter, he might still be asking that same question. I mean, the thing is, it's changing a little bit now. We are seeing more people being open about expressing their belief in the reality of UFOs. So, but it's still a career risk for a mainstream scientist to just say, "Oh yes, I believe totally in UFOs." There not many of them are doing that.
And the reason why I bring that up, because if you go back, the quote, the conversation in the cafeteria has been attributed to him in 1953 at Los Alamos, right? They're having lunch. The 1952 UFO flap, the headlines all over the newspapers. And so, the physicists are sitting around having their cheeseburgers at lunch, talking about the national headlines. Okay. All right. But back then in 1953, it goes without saying, but it needs to be repeated. Back then, nobody knew of any other planets outside of our solar system. And we didn't know that for another 40 years until 1995.
That's a good point. That is a good point.
And so, you push this up to, 2023, where we go from, 0 planets in 1994, right? That's pretty recent history to me.
Although to be fair, those guys back then assumed that there were planets out there. I think, their assumption in terms of things like star formation and the like was formation of a star is going to create debris, and those debris are planets. I think that theory was out there, but it's true. Like, there was no proof. There was no reason to be absolutely certain. One thing about
there's actually another interesting point with that. The current mapping and numbers of the Milky Way and the size of the Milky Way, it gets bigger every year. And so when you back up into the 1950s, they were saying things like millions of stars in the Milky Way. Right?
Yeah.
Or now it's a trillion.
Trillions, I think you're right. It's so many. It's incredible.
Between millions and a trillion, 1,000 millions to get to 1 billion. Yeah. That's crazy town.
And then another 1,000.
Another 1,000 billions. To get to the they didn't have that. They didn't have that concept back then. No. And today, the pragmatic black and white scientist, as that's fine, but they now understand how ginormous things are, and which includes going beyond our Milky Way and into the universe. That there are trillions of galaxies. So
good point.
Yeah.
Hey, what's kind of crazy? I just thought of this for the first time, and it's kind of an odd thing that I didn't think of this before. So Fermi's talking about where is everybody in the early 50s. You realize over at Los Alamos in the late 40s, just a couple of years earlier, that the so-called green fireballs were a seriously high-level concern of UFOs over Los Alamos and over places like White Sands and
they set up radar. They set up radar systems and built them because of those.
Correct.
Yes.
So it was a problem that got the attention of high-level military people and high-level scientists, and we know this for a fact.
Yes, it is.
And so you got to wonder, like, what was up with Fermi? Like, is he just oblivious to this? Like, right there in Los Alamos, this was clearly the scene of directed, unknown activity that was stated by the world's leading meteorite expert, Lincoln La Paz, back then. He said, these are not meteorites. And so what do you got? You have sightings of these objects maneuvering at times, dropping, moving up at times. Like they didn't make sense. It was such a problem that one question obviously was, are the Russians playing games over our sensitive airspace? Because you don't just fly things over Los Alamos back then.
No.
Not now either, but not then. And so this was a real problem. And so it's kind of weird to think that Enrico Fermi, who was a genius, would he that oblivious?
Did you?
Maybe he was.
Yeah. Did you ever get a chance to see? I'm going to see if this pops up in the chat room. I haven't mentioned it. There's a TV series that came out in 2010, 11, 12, like right in there, called Manhattan. 2 seasons. Did you see that?
No.
Okay. So it's all about, now, one of the things that I didn't realize, because we understand Los Alamos today as a laboratory. Los Alamos back then, which, development of the bomb with Oppenheimer and the team, that was a classified city, right? So that was a town that they built out in the middle of the desert. Families lived there, right? But when you said you can't fly over, it didn't even exist. It was a post office box, right? There was not any maps or anything like that. But to go back and watch that TV series, and if you haven't seen it, go and watch it. 2 seasons. It's phenomenal. Great acting, but and a great cast. But the point with all of this is the amount of secrecy that was there and the amount of intelligence, the brain power. It was the best of the entire world that was brought together, and it never left, Richard. Sandia, White Sands.
Yeah.
It never left.
Brilliant minds working there then and now. So, and, Los Alamos there have been other UFO incidents over that area after that period, but from 1948, 1949, 1950 into 51, it was such a problem that the Air Force ran something called Project Twinkle, which got some publicity back then at the time and was not really understood to be as successful as it actually was. Dr. Bruce Maccabee wrote a very good piece on this, where he actually went back and looked at the analysis that was done by they would set up these 3 different theodolites at different stations to triangulate these objects. What he found is that they, on a couple of occasions, actually did track, on one occasion specifically, they tracked an object traveling at, I think it was 100,000 feet altitude with a diameter of 30 feet at, I don't think they wrote the exact speed, but many thousands of miles per hour.
That's correct.
And so in I think it was 1949 or 1950, and that was in the report. It got buried in the report. And so the conclusion was there's not a lot of hard data here, but that was hard data. And they did get it was on station for a few hours, right? And it came in, it was tracked for quite a long time. It wasn't an anomaly that lasted, a couple of seconds and a blip on the radar, that they were actually tracking this for quite a long time. I know it was a good track. I know that they were satisfied with it, and it went into the report as a solid track. And theodolites are, then and now, they're good instruments. They're very reliable. They will see an object. They'll track its altitude, its speed. And that's what was used to track these things.
So for everybody out there in the northern side of New Mexico, Albuquerque, where centrally a lot of this intelligence and technical development was going on at several different sites in a laboratory setting, in a testing setting. So outside the perimeter here, they went into northeast New Mexico, not too far, northwest, and then central below Albuquerque. And they had this triangle set up to try and track this stuff because it was going down. The sites themselves, the buildings are still there.
From what I recall from the Twinkle report, once they set up, first of all, there was an argument over the location of one of the stations, and it was said that you put this in an area where there's no activity. Why are you doing that? And so there was argument that the project was set up to fail. I don't know if that's true or not, but maybe. But I think Ruppelt actually wrote about this in his book, Report on Unidentified Flying Objects, that the activity just dropped while Twinkle was underway. And I think that is true, but it didn't stop. And they did track a few unknowns, and they got that one really good one. That is now, not explainable.
If we, I'll just say you and I, right? If you and I find out about, intelligent life, we find a biosphere on a planet, and we head out and we're going to go check it out. and we're looking at it, and let's say it's Neanderthal level, or 10,000 year, like us 10,000 years ago, right? Where we've got fire, right? Maybe agriculture, maybe we're domesticating animals, right? We've tamed the house cat. Anyway, it's a joke.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Sure.
So house cats are aliens. So but we go. What would we do? We would go and look for maybe campfires, something, and just monitor and check things out. Maybe we'll go back in 100 years or 1,000
Hopefully
years.
that's all we would do. Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully that's all we would do.
Exactly. But then, go back and check in. Oh, check it out. They've got wagons. They've got the wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. And go back. Oh, holy crap. Smokestacks. Right. Yeah. Steam power.
Assuming that our civilization is stable enough to track their civilization over a period of many centuries or millennia.
Well, and that's what I assume that's what we would do. Hopefully just observe. Well, ET would do the same thing here. They would go to where the technology is happening. Suddenly you're seeing atoms getting split, right? You're seeing, radioactivity in certain locations at a certain historical time period. You're going to have some observation going there. I would absolutely say that would have to be the case. We would do the same thing.
I think that did happen. I think that's part of our history. I think we've been subject to my opinion about this at this time is that we were subject to low level but ongoing monitoring for a long time. I say low level because there wasn't an awareness, certainly by people, that this was happening. I mean, there are stories of the gods. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. And maybe some of those might relate to this. Totally possible. But it's not an overt part of our history. Doesn't mean that we weren't manipulated. Doesn't mean that we weren't tweaked. My guess is that if we were tweaked, it might have been about 50,000 years ago, 50, 60, quite possible. But I don't know that, but it's possible. But I maintain, I believe, when I look at the long history, that something changed during the 20th century, that we brought the whole neighborhood in. Because what we start seeing are really large numbers of UFO sightings starting in the mid-20th century. And you could say, well, it's because our capability has improved, and that's absolutely true. But, I was thinking a few months ago about 19th century America. Now, that was a very advanced society. I mean, basically, they were a society that had basically a scientific orientation for the most part. They were building railroads, telescopes, telegraph. These were right. These were people who were making things happen. They were smart, can-do attitude, and yet there was no consciousness of UFOs. Why not? Were they just oblivious? I don't think they were oblivious. They were outside. They were looking at the skies a lot. There wasn't this widespread consciousness in America of the 1870s that there's these things here, and I think it's because there wasn't a lot of it going on. I think that's the answer, and I think the truth is that during the 20th century, more and more groups started to arrive here. We're at a point now where sightings are happening in massive amounts, thousands in North America every year. The rest of the world, I am convinced, is having a lot of them, but they don't report them. There's not a good reporting infrastructure for much of the rest of the world. But we're seeing a lot of these things.
You're a historian, and when you look back and you think about, because the 19th century is very extraordinary. The Industrial Revolution, oil, everything was crazy.
Yeah.
Went down.
Absolutely.
Right? Telephone, phonograph, telegraphs, electricity were wiring. I think we did
photography.
We did our first transatlantic cable, at that time with ship. But anyway, as crazy as that sounds, in 1900, we were still horse and buggy, right? That's it. We were still gas lamps. We were still trying to figure out how to light up Manhattan, right? But
we were not airborne.
No, we were
which
not
meant that
airborne
when
in
you look
1903.
up in the sky,
Right.
there'd be no drones, maybe a couple of balloons. Like you might see 5 balloons in your lifetime. Maybe, I don't know, but probably not many. I
Yeah,
don't
well, I
think
think
people
the
were.
answer is 0, unless you were in France. But
Yes. So in other words, you would, if there was an object in the sky, one would think you'd notice it.
you would notice it. And then, so to go from 1900, and when I say horse and buggy, I'm not saying this in a loose context. That's what was here, and gas lamps, to just 40 years later, 40, right? Jet aircraft, atomic knowledge, circuitry, radios, radar, transoceanic flights, all of this stuff. 4 decades, man. 4 decades.
Yeah, it is extraordinary.
I just can't explain that. And then if you take it one step further, 22 decades, man. 20 years after that, Jimi Hendrix. What? Think of it. I mean, just Richard.
Actually, yeah. Culturally speaking,
that's not a joke.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah. So Hendrix was an ET. That's what we can do. We can deduce that from all of that. How
those ridiculously long fingers, they're probably alien.
Yeah, he was ET, man. He was a gift from them. But how do we explain those leaps in technology if it wasn't from the possibility of crash retrievals or some kind of assistance? Is it really putting it out there too far, or does it answer a lot of questions?
In my opinion, I think we did those things. Now, I mean, I've actually had a conversation with a very brilliant friend of mine who believes, and maybe he's right, that there is aliens that were seeded in our society from the early 20th century. It is a theory. I don't know what I think about that. What I would say is the logic of our science is inexorable. In other words, once you achieve a breakthrough in certain areas, they are going to lead to more breakthroughs. And really the ultimate breakthrough, I mean, actually goes back to when we developed language, complex language, probably 50,000 plus years ago, I think is the best estimate. And I say that I don't want to get off track here, but what our whole journey as a species has been is to create tools by which we can manipulate our environment. And actually our greatest invention toward that end is probably language, complex language, my opinion. That allows everything else. It allows you to manipulate information, to create ideas, to pass on ideas, to communicate these things. And you could argue in the long, long scheme of things, you're looking at billions of years, 50,000 years is not that long ago. You might just say, once those beings with their big frontal cortex had language to communicate, that what we're doing now could be considered an inevitability. And you could say it's just a matter of time. That's actually my position. So now there are a couple of other necessary steps along the way. You have to discover science. Language allows you to discover mathematics, but that's not quite the same as science. So we really discover science, let's say 300-400 years ago.
Right.
Beginnings, Newton, Descartes, and all of those guys. Mm-hmm. And that is the real key. So once you have a scientific understanding, my opinion on it at this point is that you're basically looking at a matter of time before you crack the atom. And things speed up to a certain point. I don't think they're going to speed up forever, but I think that they may continue to speed up for a while because now we have a new tool, strong generative AI, where that's on the way. So we're still continually increasing our ability to manipulate the world around us. So I'm not sure that you need aliens to explain what we have, but what I will say is that there have been retrievals of UFOs. We have them. We have them, some that have crashed and some that didn't crash, some that are intact, and we've got them. And there has been covert, deeply covert study of these objects and the technologies associated with them. And I have to assume, we have to assume, I feel, that that's a nice little bonus right there. So that I would see it as an accelerant to our what would be maybe a somewhat slower progress in our technology and science, and that what these beings have, presumably being quite a bit more advanced than what we have, would speed us up. Yes. But I think that given enough time, and probably not a lot of time, that we would be on the same basic trajectory, because science is science. And the way that we've got our society structured, we've got all of these competitive scientific institutions around the world. I mean, look at AI. You've got these people from Elon Musk to many other people saying this AI can be dangerous. And yes, everyone knows it can be. How do you stop it? Impossible. Military reasons alone would make it impossible to stop it. The United States is competing with Russia and China, and everyone knows you get super strong AI for your military first, you're going to have a massive advantage. So that alone. And then you got corporations wanting it. And now you got the general public with a demand for it. So the demand, there's just too many people in the game working. You got Google, you've got Facebook, you've got, who else is working on AI? Everyone, Boston Dynamics.
Israel,
nations, corporations.
Yeah.
It's just Pandora's box is open and all that stuff is flown out. So there's no getting it back in. And that's just one example. So our society, pardon me, is structured now that we've got I would say sophisticated understanding of scientific principles and many, many specific sciences. I mean, we're operating at a very high level these days, and we're competing. We've got competing factions in the world. So that's a perfect recipe for rapid technological scientific advance, which I think is still happening.
Yeah, we don't necessarily, I want to be very clear to the audience here. We don't necessarily have to backwards engineer something and understand it fully. You only have to look at something and get an idea and be inspired.
Exactly. And you can come up with your own version.
Your own version. What they have. Possible, right? Oh, okay. That's fiber optics. I don't know what this does. Exactly. Right? That's a circuit board. Okay. All right. You only need the inspiration.
I think that you nailed it. That's exactly it. The biggest obstacle or the most important opening up the gate that you need is knowing that such and such a thing is possible. You have to know it's possible. And that opens all the possibilities up for you. So in other words, talk about a flying saucer. Once you know that it's possible for an object instantly to accelerate from a hovering position and make a right angle turn silently, then you're like, okay, how do we do that?
How do we do it?
Let's open up our mind and figure it out. So that, I think, is a big, big advantage of the recovery of these UFOs. They let you know that certain things are possible in areas like material science, in areas like propulsion. Those are two big ones right there, and many others. But yes, I think that they have been instrumental in our development in the classified world. But to answer the question, like, is it necessary? No, I don't think so. I think that our scientific path that we have been on would probably get us to these places eventually, and maybe not that much longer, maybe just a little bit longer.
I did a report earlier today on the news. I've just check this out, Richard. So a group of researchers, university, just published a paper and peer reviewed. They went and looked at Da Vinci's journals, a set of journals, and a set of experiments that he had there trying to figure out gravity. Now, let's see. You just said Newton, right? 300 years ago. Get that. Now let's bounce back another 300 years before that. Da Vinci was born in 1450 or something and died in 1510 or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he did laid out in these journals a set of experiments trying to figure out gravity as an acceleration tool, right? A source. And that's his thing. They said that Da Vinci in 1500, man, this is like, what? Was 97% there. That Newton took his stuff in 1750, right, and published it 300 years ago, and figured out the gravitational rules and laws that we generally still use today. But the only reason, as they write in this report, the only reason Da Vinci didn't go 100%, he didn't have a clock accurate enough to measure the time when an object drops to the ground.
Oh, very interesting.
And if he would have had that, we would have had a 300-year jump start. That's crazy, isn't it?
That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, it was published today.
He was amazing. I've got his journals on the bookshelf over there. I'm going to take a look.
You know what? It made me
look for that.
Yeah, I've got it too, packed in a box.
Yeah.
If you want to go pull it out. But here's the thing, though. When we go there's a tie-in here to Wilson Davis, because if we look at the concepts of the ideas that we are laying out here, and some of the statements that were in the Wilson Davis document, pretty much is exactly what we're talking about here, right? We have a craft, we know it can fly, we just can't get the sucker in the air, right? And we're having a difficult time. But you only have to look and observe the craft, because when you see the stuff that's coming out of Skunk Works, it would seriously suggest a knowledge of something. Stealth paints, gravitic, electromagnetic forces on the wings interfering with lift to get these things off the ground faster.
Yeah, they've been working on that for decades.
Where do these ideas come from?
I don't know. I mean, it's some of it could very well be inspired from elsewhere. I would certainly say that, but there's a lot of very, very brilliant people working on these things, no question, and way more brilliant than I could ever be. They've got those things figured out. So I think there's a lot of very good people doing work, but yes, some inspiration from beyond. I definitely do think that's the case.
What have you been thinking about a timeline here? You've been writing about this and talking about, the big D word for a couple of decades now. And it certainly seems that we're in a brave new world, right? Let's quote, George Orwell real quick. But we're right here. There is something going on. Do you feel, and it could be from a Washington, D.C. control of a timeline of a rollout, or is there something else going on that isn't necessarily in their control and things could be quicker? Do you think that there is something that's about to happen?
And on the UFO scene or on the disclosure scene, you're saying?
Yeah.
I don't. I don't think that I do.
Well, why?
I don't. Here's why. I don't see what is to be gained, and how do you play it? How do you play disclosure? Do you say we have come to understand that some of these objects are not from this civilization? What are they going to disclose? If they say that, it's going to be, they might in the immediate term be able to control all of the media, all of the talking points, so that people just accept, oh wow, you just figured that out, okay. But I don't think that's going to last very long. And maybe they won't even care if they're implicated in a cover-up. Maybe they're not going to care. In the earlier years, the big concern that I had, and I don't think I was alone, was that if the government were to admit this, then they're going to admit that they've been lying for a long time, and they don't want to do that. But I think we're getting to a point where maybe they just don't give a crap. They just don't care. Maybe they don't care. We've moved into an era. Look, you've got most national leaders around the world. Many of them are utterly hated by their people, and they're still in power. They don't care. They know they don't have to care. What's going to happen to them? They get voted out, and then they go work for some NGO, for the World Bank or for Davos or whatever. They don't care. We're in a new era, and there's really no. You don't get the sense that any of these politicians in our world really give a damn about what the public thinks of them. And so I think we could be getting to the point where the government, let's just say the United States government, might get to a point, and I'm just thinking out loud here with you, where they decide it is in our interest now to make a statement, and people want to think we lied all these years. We don't really care. We'll handle it. But there's still going to be a lot of other questions. Are there abductions? Are you hiding classified technology? Let's take a look at it. Energy breakthroughs, all of that.
Right.
So these presumably would be difficult to contain. And then the biggest question, it's never going to be able to be asked in our society. I mean, so many things are just completely sealed off, but you have to ask, are any of them here in our society now? And I know it sounds like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but we got to get over that. We have to recognize that this is a real possibility. You talk to any, in one of the your commercials during the break, you mentioned Linda Moulton Howe getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. Mm-hmm. She deserves it. Well, mm-hmm. Linda has talked about human-looking beings, human-looking aliens. Sure, she has. She's come across those stories, as have I, as have a lot of people. A lot of researchers have come across this. What do we do with that if you have the recognition that there are beings that are here? And are we going to be okay with the fact that some of them are here looking like us? What are they doing? And do they have influence over our world? This is, it sounds crazy, but it's not crazy. It's a legit question to ask. And no one in the UFO field really wants to ask it because they don't like the way it makes them sound, which, okay, I get that. I don't want to bring it up either, but how do you ignore it? So there are difficult questions that are liable to be raised. I don't know if they're likely to be raised, but they're liable to be raised. So disclosure it's always going to be messy. I just don't see it as an easy thing. And I'll just stop. But I think the power of inertia is very great here. And this secret's been going for a long time. And I continue to feel that this will go for as long as it can be dragged out, because it's in their interest. It's in the interest of the beings that are here, and it's in the interest of the global system of governance that has come into place. It's in their interest as well to keep this on the down low.
That's why I think that the movie They Live is a documentary, right? When you stop and you think about that. But is it also possible that the United States government, will stay there, we could say the rest of the world and other state actors, but let's say the United States government is holding off as long as they can, so that they're hoping that the James Webb Space Telescope is going to produce something, because then that takes the pressure off, right? So James Webb says, we got a techno signature, not a biosignature. We've got a techno signature coming off of TRAPPIST-1, planet number 4, and there are city lights, right? Or whatever it may be, right? Where it's something that will take the pressure off, so they can therefore, from this point forward, base it on that, and the conversation is on the table. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, that's possible, but that doesn't make the UFO problem go away. People still encounter objects, low hovering triangles 100 feet over their house at 2:30 in the morning. That still happens. They still have apparent abduction experiences. That still happens. There are still sightings of utterly extraordinary objects in our skies. And increasingly, you can try to pass them off as secret tech, but some of them are still kind of tough to pass off that way. So I don't know. I think the game plan is going to be turn UFOs into balloons, destigmatize UFOs and make them non-exotic, pretend that there are no exotic UFO reports, and just keep going along that path. I think that's, I still think that you have a concerted effort to siphon UFOs out of the public conversation, or at least to rebrand it to such an extent that it's not real. It's just balloons.
They have to rebrand their own branding, right? It was them that went from UFOs to UAPs, and it started this conversation, and getting Tucker Carlson to go off the rails. And so if you go and
he's the one mainstream guy who actually is decent on this.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying in the mass media context, he went off the rails. Mm-hmm. So you did all of it, and now you're going to turn around and rebrand the branding that you worked so hard on. That's why I
think so.
Yeah, and it goes back to your point, though, Richard. So if James Webb takes the pressure off, then it's not about what the government knew. They can now say, yeah, this stuff was real. We didn't know. James Webb just confirmed it. So now we can go back and historically look at it. But we got nothing. We didn't know.
Well, they can do that because they'll do everything they can to rewrite history and to erase the history. There's the history of military encounters with flying saucers is still there. The history of people having close encounters and abduction experiences with landed craft is still there.
Right.
So you can say, oh yeah, we've discovered a techno signal. Yeah, that's great. That's nice and safe. That's way far away on another star system.
Exactly.
That doesn't the problem that the U.S. government and any government, but especially the U.S. has, is being implicated in a lie and implicated in a cover-up and implicated in doing something that's actually important to hide this important phenomenon. So that means that they have to play this game of pretend, like, oh, let's look into this UFO, these UAPs, and let's see if there's something there. That's where they're at right now. We're like, yeah, we're genuinely exploring this, and if we find anything, we'll tell you. And that's all dishonest. That's utterly dishonest. But finding another life form somewhere else in the universe or a signal, that doesn't implicate them in anything bad. So that's safe.
Right.
That's a totally safe thing.
They're hoping, man. They're hoping, man, because that takes the pressure off, right? The whole
maybe it will. Maybe it will.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. And when you combine all of that with exoplanets and the confirmation of this and Goldilocks zones and the size of this and what is going on and fast radio bursts, right? You constantly acquire all of the scientific data and you're pushing it out into the public, right? You're taking the pressure off of you. Somebody's going to make that discovery for you.
We're running out of time, because you think of it this way. The level of our technology is becoming so advanced. It's going to make UFO sightings almost seem like, no big deal. That's ours. It's all ours. And they'll just erase the history, which they're already doing as everything they can to do. And if there's a presence of other beings that have an agenda, I think once we get past a certain point in our society and our technology, they may see that there's clear sailing as far as UFOs go. They may say, oh yeah, that's just part of your history, part of our history, that we got that wrong. There are UFOs now, but that's things that we make. Like, I could see that happening.
Yeah, TR3B is such a great example of that, or the idea of a TR3B.
And
that's a triangle, right? Anti-gravitic triangle, but it could be any shape, right? And so if that happens, sightings are not even legit anymore.
I'm going to say, so I have a couple of correspondents who are concerned that there's an infiltration going on. So let's just say, just pretend that that's true, because it could be true. If there is, then you have to ask yourself, Are they just, have they inserted themselves into our world and are managing our world for their ends, not for our ends? You're looking at entire global civilization falling to pieces, going into what I keep calling the fourth stage of humanity, basically turning us into one big digital anthill. That's happening. Is that our design or is that someone else's design? Maybe it's both. But if there is an infiltration, the clock is ticking for our ability, very likely, to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Maybe the clock's already struck midnight and maybe it's too late. But,
it's
but maybe
kind of
not.
You brought up the point, though. Invasion of the body. That's what parasites do, right? Get into the host body and live off of it, and hopefully just take everything over and survive off of that. And that could be the case.
I mean, someone who thinks that this is crazy talk should just take a step back and you look at the UFO phenomenon. You look at the long history of encounters, of abductions, of alleged hybridization, David Jacobs' work on hybrids, human-looking hybrids, and all of that. You put this together, and it is not difficult. It is not outrageous even when you actually look at the testimony and evidence that there could be this infiltration happening. And if that's the case, you could say, well, some people say it's benign, and some people say, nope, it's not benign. But it's happening, and it's covert. There's definitely a covert presence of other that's here. And I do believe that they're interacting in our world. The real question is, what are they doing? What's the agenda? It's not a trivial matter. There's something big happening. It's been happening since really the almost mid-20th century, in a big way. I think we confuse ourselves when we say, oh, they've always been here. I think we've got to really be careful about that. Yes, someone has kind of always been here, but are they the ones who are acting on us now? Because you don't get reports of gray aliens back in the time of Leonardo da Vinci. You don't.
No,
there's a friend of Leonardo's who actually had a very bizarre encounter.
Yes.
Fabio Cardano. I wrote about him in one of my books.
Yep.
But they were human looking, and they talked to him. They weren't gray aliens. So I think we're dealing with something very different today. This is not the same thing as the long-standing presence. I think there's something much more active, and that we should be concerned about. It is concerning.
Well, we're actually at the end of the show, but let me make this one comment. If you think about how thick your thickest book is that you wrote, right? How many pages, right? Okay. Did you ever bust 1,000 pages?
Not in one book, no. Highest level, 634. That's my top number.
That's a lot of writing, right? Okay. Now imagine 600 pages and how many words are on a page. If you were logging every star system in the Milky Way, think about the size of the database. Right? So
pretty big.
If you are cruising by Earth, our star system here, and what do we have? 8 planets here. We have another 3,000 dwarf planets, out beyond.
Take Pluto out. I like Pluto as a planet.
Okay, but just think about this for a second, right? So you're cruising by. How much time Earth is going to get a number, right? It's not going to get a name. It's going to get a number. How much time are you going to spend here? Because you have another, right? 5 trillion, whatever, just here in the Milky Way, right? And that you have to go and log and do, because that's what we're doing now. We are trying to map the Milky Way. We're doing our best to get that done from here, right? Now, how thick is that book? It's ginormous. So how much time? So back to your point, Richard,
right.
Are you going to come back?
Possibly they would come back now. I think now is the time.
Yeah.
Because it's our moment when we're about to leap into their world.
That's right. And so
we're of interest for that.
And here's the other spin. This is my other spin. I'll let you chew on this and everybody can think about this. Here we are. Here's Earth. So we've been sending out, as we know, radio, television, let's say 150 years. Let's go 100. We see the very beginnings of Marconi and Tesla, right? Okay. So let's just say we're in 2023. So let's say 150 years we've been broadcasting out. We've been broadcasting out realistic stuff for maybe 100. So let's go 100 years. 100 years at the speed of light out. We've got about 2,000 star systems in our local neighborhood that are 100 light years away. Okay? So we would expect that number in half, 1,000 that are 50 light years away. That if there is something intelligent, we would expect something now, right now, like this year. Right. And next year and the year after wouldn't necessarily be before that because they haven't gotten our signals. Right. So I don't put that past a possibility if we are dealing with traditional speed of light, radio transmission signals traveling at the speed of light, that if we stay with Einstein and relativity, that's what we're dealing with. So there is no reason why right now, this time period, that the activity is kicked up like it has, because we've let them know, right? We're Morse coding this thing, right? Beep, 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 right? We're over here, beep, beep, beep. And yeah. So I would say that the next 5-10 years, because every 5-10 years past that, now we're getting out into the thousands of planets that are within that region, of 100 light years.
Okay.
So that's my take, and I don't know, man. I'm feeling pretty good about it.
I think they found us a little earlier than that because at least the evidence looks like was an explosion of UFO sightings starting in the 1940s. There were some before that, but you get a massive amount, seemingly in the 40s, and I think that might be the first wave.
Yeah, sure. And what you're referring to, that no, you're absolutely correct. And you can go back to in Nuremberg, and you can go back to the 1890s, and we can push things back to other stuff and what Moses was seeing. All right, so we have all of that through history for sure. Yeah. But those are the civilizations that had the technology to find us. It's a little bit different. So I'm just referring to those out there that may be at our level, not necessarily interstellar, but they could send a signal, right? So, yeah.
This conversation needs to go to a place where you burn one and you just keep going through the night. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know.
This is one of those. This is moving into stoner territory.
I haven't burned one in 20 years, but I would do it with you. Do you remember? I'll leave you with this. One of my favorite scenes of burning weed is about our community. It's Animal House. And they go over, Donald Sutherland is the hippie professor, right? Okay. And they go over to his house and they're going to smoke pot, right? And they all sit down, they light candles, and, they're smoking weed, Donald Sutherland. And one of the kids from the frat, he goes, you mean like the cell in my thumbnail could be like a whole universe? Dude, that scene is the best, man.
What's the name of it? I haven't seen it.
That's Animal House with John Belushi. Oh man,
that was an Animal House.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw that a long time ago. Okay, gotta watch that again.
You mean the cell? Dude, it's the best. All right, man. Awesome. Richard, give my best to Tracy, sir. Love you, brother. And this is going to get crazier and crazier. And I can't wait until our next conversation. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Jimmy.
Richard Dolan Members. And if you caught part of this show, I always send Richard a file, and he gets it up on his site for Richard Dolan Members, and all of you guys can go and enjoy it over there and replay it to your heart's content. Thank you so much, Richard. Behave and be well, my friend.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Take care.
The best, Richard Dolan. And I'm going to get out of here. I'm over. And this is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. And I'm going to watch. Here's the thing. Richard and I always have an after show, but tonight it's late. I'm gonna watch him click out. He's gonna go bye. I'll see you. Fade to Black. Thank you so much, Richard. The absolute very best. Fade to Black is produced by Hill J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster was True the Geek Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until the next time you see me, I've got a cold. We'll see how I feel tomorrow. Be safe. Go Beckley Tappy.